Hey guys, I'm pretty excited to show you this build, not because it has anything like crazy mechanic wise, but simply because it was a very fun build to play with. And this is a bit old school way of building, mostly just getting big life pool and life sustain, and that's pretty much good. I do have some block, but other than that, it's not a very tanky build. But it was pretty surprising that it's so easy to scale the damage on this build. And the damage wise, it doesn't have like crazy amount of damage. While mapping, it feels really great. The core concept of this build is self-ignite with the Eye of Innocence. This is an old school item. It does 100 damage when you ignite an enemy. And then Mokou's Embrace, which recently got reworked, chance to be ignited. So essentially Eye of Innocence, when you ignite an enemy, does damage to you, and because of Mokou's Embrace, it ignites you. And when it does that, it gives you, with the catalyst, caster catalyst, gives you up to 48% cast speed while ignited. On top of that, Hotheaded unique jewel also gives you up to 20% attack, cast speed and movement speed. So it gets up to 68% cast speed when you get ignited. And you don't need to get hit by the enemies. You just ignite enemies and essentially get a small ignite back to yourself. This build is also like pure blood magic. Using the Malachai Simula. You don't have to use Malachai Simula, but it's very hard to outdamage this helmet. It really gives a lot of damage. And it also gives you blood magic, so you don't need to travel towards the blood magic, and the blood magic keystone itself gives you 10% more life. So that's great. But then again, you can't really have many auras, so in this case I decided to go with the Vitality and with just Sublime Vision, which disables all the other auras, but it increases the effectiveness of that Vitality aura. And on top of that, the Sublime Vision gives me regenerate 15 life over 1 second when you get hit while affected by Vitality. And you always get hit if you are igniting enemies because of Eye of Innocence. So you do get big regen, you do get a big cast speed and movement speed, and you do get life on hit, and a lot of it. Using Vitality's Watcher's Eye, I'm getting 29 life gain on hit from any sources. A ring can also have life gain on hit, or you can use a unique ring. Namau Sign can give you up to 30 life when you ignite an enemy. Probably it's not worth going for Namau Sign. Maybe early on it is, but later on you can replace with the rare ring with life gain on hit by your spells. And Blazing Salvo releases a lot of projectiles, and each of those projectiles can ignite and proc the Eye of Innocence, which does damage to you. But that's why you do need life gain on hit to kind of offset the damage done from Eye of Innocence. And this is the old school way of building with the Eye of Innocence and then life gain on hit or life gain on ignite. And then just hitting many times per second. I kind of wanted to almost fully automate all the casting damage taken setups. That's another thing. The Eye of Innocence allows me to automate multiple things with casting damage taken setups. I don't need to proc casting damage taken like all the time on cooldown. I just need to proc it once or twice. Most of the time I don't even need to proc it to clear out all the enemies. But it's very easy to proc it, and I proc 2 curses, Flammability and Sniper's Mark. Sniper's Mark is kind of amazing. Overall, this build is a success, like a really fun build to play. It's fast, but you do really want all the cast speed that you can get to make this feel good. I tried a different setup without the blood magic, going with Eldritch Battery, and I'm gonna talk about that later on. But I had less cast speed and it just did not feel as good, and I had to worry about the sustain. So in the end I just refunded points back and set up my blood magic again. This build, like I mentioned, does not have a lot of defenses other than life gain and hit and pretty decent life pool, which is 7.1 thousand unreserved life. And I do have a staff block and recover 2% life and yes on block, but it's just one defensive layer essentially in terms of mitigation. So there are still a lot of things that can one-shot you, and I don't have a lot of chaos resistance because I'm using so many unique items. In fact, I only have 2 rare items. All the other items are unique. So there's not much flexibility when it comes to like getting resistances, and especially chaos resistance. Chaos can be a bit sketchy. And I haven't tried any Uber bosses. I just tried a bunch of tier 16 guardians, multiple guardians at the same time in the Maven's Invitation. Then Cirrus, normal Cirrus went down very surprisingly easy. Deathless as well. And the damage is really nice. It just feels really pleasant. It doesn't have crazy damage, but you can always get more damage by investing into this build more. By the way, the investment was like 5 divines. Initially I thought that it's gonna be like 3 divines, but then I started buying gems, and then like 120 blazing salvo was like 1 divine. It's 1 divine here, 2 divine here, and then it just adds up to like 5 divines, I would say. And then like I corrupted the Eye of Innocence with the additional course, was actually surprisingly cheap as well, but then you also need to add the anointment, which adds extra price. So, but I wouldn't take this build to uber bossing unless you add some more defensive layers, and it's hard to do that when you cannot add like typical determination aura and or like grace, or you cannot really cap your spell suppression, stuff like that. However, you can get even more life. You can get probably close to maybe even over 8,000 life, which should be, I believe, sufficient for uber bosses as long as you know the mechanics, which I don't really do uber bosses, so I don't really worry about that. I just do like normal endgame bosses like Cirrus. So I'm gonna talk in more details about this build. As always, I'm gonna put timestamps, and then in the video description you're gonna find the path of building import code. I will actually add 2 path of building import codes because there are sort of 2 versions of this. One is the blood magic and one is the eldritch battery with the red cage. So I'm gonna talk about my current setup and how items interact with each other. So we start with the Malachai Simula, which does give blood magic and 20% chance to deal double damage. I actually managed to get the Sniper's Mark helmet enchantment, but there are other enchantments that you can go for, like Blazing Salvo enchantments, pretty much any of them. And then I am using Arn's Anguish belt, which essentially gives you a chance to deal triple damage. And yes, I know, they don't stack. Double damage and triple damage don't stack, but that's not the problem. You don't have high enough chance to deal double damage and a high enough chance to deal triple damage that we would always roll at the same time. I do have 6 maximum endurance charges, and you get 3% chance to deal triple damage from the belt per endurance charge. So essentially I end up with 18% chance to deal triple damage and 20% chance to deal double damage. What happens when you roll double damage and triple damage at the same time? You just get triple damage. What happens when you only get double damage and not triple damage? Well, you have double damage. What happens when you only get triple damage and not double damage? Well, you have triple damage. So as you can see, it doesn't really break anything. It just, sure, you may sometimes roll double damage and triple damage, but you still then get triple damage. They don't stack together, you just get the bigger multiplier, and that's it. Now this belt also has percentage increased life, which can be catalysted with the life and mana catalyst to boost it to 18%. And the way I'm generating endurance charges is pretty simple. Because Eye of Innocence like consistently does damage to me, a small amount, I can just use Enduring Composure, small cluster jewel, gain 1 endurance charge every second if you have been hit recently. So I still need to wait like 6 seconds. Well, actually I can use Enduring Cry near the boss to instantly get more endurance charges, which gets converted into brutal charges. So I still need to wait like a couple of seconds to maximize the endurance charges, unless I use Rallycash Impatience boots. Quick, swap, boom, maximum charges. And I don't need to wait anything, I just quickly swap them back, and then boom. Next, I chose to use Martyr of Innocence. No real big reason, it just gives a lot of damage. Yeah, just a lot of damage, and it's very cheap. And because Battle Mage, it gives all the flat damage that you see on the weapon to all my skills. And because I'm proccing low level like Blazing Salvo and Volatile Dead, these low level skills get a lot of flat damage from the Martyr of Innocence. So even my cast and damage taken setups, even if they are low level, they still do decent damage. Now, the only 2 rare items is the ring. I tried to get either a recoup, life gain on hit by a spells, and then I wanted decent life. It's not ideal, but this is... I also needed specific resistances. I'm barely capping cold resistance, and then hardly capping lightning and fire. So capping resistance could be a challenge because you only have 2 rare items in this case. Oh, I forgot boots, I'm gonna mention in a moment. On the gloves you can get Eldritch Implicits, which increases your mark effect, which to be honest doesn't give all that much damage. And then chance to unnerve enemies, which makes them take 10% increased spell damage. And also the focus mode, increase attack and cast speed while focused. And now lastly, Omeyocan boots. I am using these boots purely just to get onslaught, permanent onslaught. Since I do not have mana, I have 0 out of 0 mana, I'm never on low mana. Low mana does not mean that you have low amount of mana, it means that you have half of your mana. And 0 out of 0 is not half, 0 out of 0 is full, I guess, or empty. But never half. Like ideally I would want to also get the Labyrinth enchantment for like a life regen if you have been hit recently, or maybe even elemental penetration if you haven't killed recently, which would work well for bosses, and then maybe even corrupted with the percentage increased life, but that's like a icing on the cake. Same goes for Kaom's Heart. You can also corrupt Kaom's Heart with a couple good things like increase damage, I believe up to 50%, or maximum life, but that's expensive, like 4 or 5 divines, because Righteous Fire builds. You can also get physical damage reduction while stationary, stuff like that. So there are some good corruptions. Same goes on belt. You can also go for the corrupted belt with the increased maximum life, but make sure that the explicit, the increased maximum life, is a high roll if you're looking for the corrupted belt. Eye of Innocence, additional curse was also pretty cheap, but anointing with the special oil was also pretty expensive. I believe you can use the catalyst to increase the fire damage that this amulet does to you, but you kind of have to do it yourself because you cannot catalyst after the corruption. Now, one last thing, Martyr of Innocence also gives you immunity to freeze and chill while ignited, which is great, which is pretty much all the time, and the ignite lasts for 2 seconds unless you also use, instead of Omeyocan boots, you can use Death's Door. It has +1 to maximum endurance charges, which does give extra 3% chance to deal triple damage, which is great, and we can be corrupted with extra endurance charges implicit as well, or life. Those would be like really expensive. The interesting thing with the Death's Door is that 50% increase elemental ailment duration on you, which essentially increases the duration of ignites. You can kind of extend the ignite duration, which helps you move from enemy pack to enemy pack without losing all the speed, but it's not really mandatory. Then on the passive skill tree, like I said, I am using Hotheaded. It's not perfect, but it's close enough. Watcher's Eye with Vitalities, life gain on hit, the Sublime Vision for Vitality, and I don't have much room for other jewels because I am also using the small cluster jewel for the Enduring Composure. I actually needed quite a bit of dexterity, so if you can get a lot of dexterity on a large cluster jewel or a small cluster jewel, that would be ideal. Dexterity and resistances. One of the notes is Body and Projection. It gives you a chance to knock enemies back with spell damage, which is pretty nice, and defensively it's not mandatory, but it is pretty nice. And then the other one is Arcane Heroism, because normally, because I'm Blood Magic, I cannot gain Arcane Surge. So this allows me to gain Arcane Surge even while being Blood Magic. The medium cluster jewel that I'm using is the AoE one. I just get big AoE from Titanic Sphinx and then some AoE and even more life on Towering Threads. Now, when it comes to AoE, I'm not entirely sure. Probably not all projectiles can overlap if I show you PUB. This is without Righteous Fire, by the way. I think not all projectiles can overlap, but if all projectiles can overlap, this has like 4.7 million DPS before Righteous Fire. And I'm not sure how much AoE do you need. Do you actually want to reduce your AoE to kind of reduce the spread of the projectiles? I'm not entirely sure, because you can also replace like Elemental Penetration with Concentrated Effect, which adds almost 1 million DPS extra. And if you enable Righteous Fire, then it reaches 7.8 million DPS. Which is pretty surprising considering that I don't even have like a corrupted body armor or corrupted boots with the extra endurance charge. So you can still get quite a lot more damage, and this is not even low life. You can actually go with the Pain Attunement and then just add Petrified Blood. I actually want to show you how much DPS I would have with the Pain Attunement. If I go on low life, boom, over 10 million DPS is achievable. So the damage can be improved if you really want to. You can also get a bit more life as well. I was initially also taking this one for the increased regen. It adds a lot, but in the end I decided if I cannot survive like one shots, then regen is not gonna help me. But it would, this regen would allow you to run Righteous Fire more reliably, and that's why I also have Enduring Cry. If I activate Righteous Fire, like I cannot sustain it normally, but if I use Enduring Cry, it heals me. But if I'm attacking and hitting enemies, the life gain on hit can sustain you against bosses pretty easily. But you don't really want to run it all the time. You do want that extra regen and life sustain while mapping. The Elemental Overload is a bit tricky to activate because I'm using Spell Echo. By the way, not even Awakened Spell Echo, that would also give more damage. Spell Echo, I believe, it casts twice, but both casts either roll critical strike chance or not. So you either crit with both of them or with none of them. So I have 7.8 critical strike chance, which isn't ideal. Actually, I have a bit more because Scion, I am traveling towards the Mark the Prey just to be able to generate frenzy charges as well. Frenzy charges gives you speed and more damage. Critical strike chance against marked enemies. So it seems like it's a big travel, but you also need dexterity for the sniper's mark, so it's not too bad. And on top of that, you do get damage against marked enemies as well here. By the way, this is Deadeye Chieftain. I picked Chieftain for the, well, obvious cover enemies in Ash, Stand, which also is boosting my damage because of Iron Will, which isn't that high, but yeah, it's actually pretty low. But it also gives me extra regen and just damage. But you can go with like Inquisitor. Actually, I kind of want to see how much damage would I gain. I would lose cover enemies in Ash, but you could also go with the Forbidden Jewels and get the Inquisitor on top of that. Let's see, 7.8 mil. If I take this, 8.2 mil. So it would be a bit. Well, actually, I would lose cover enemies in Ash, so I wouldn't really gain much more damage. So I'm gonna stick with Chieftain. The flask, I try to automate as many things. I'm also using Amethyst Flask because my hair stress is like really bad. It's negative -60. I am also using the Pantheon power. Just this one is just to help with the like poison and hair's dots a bit more. And then this one I usually, since I am already immune to freeze and chill, and ignite is required for me, I cannot be immune to ignite. I tend to always run this one just to kind of reduce the spikiness of the damage. Sometimes in maps when I get shocked, it reduces the shock effect. It's not ideal, but it works for me. The other flask is a Ruby Flask. This is just to kind of mitigate the damage from the Eye of Innocence a bit and for the Righteous Fire Sustain, and I chose to automate them completely. I don't want to think about the utility flask at all. So now the other setup, no Sublime Vision, and it is way less life in the end, but it does have determination, so it does have more armor, but in the end it doesn't even seem like it's better. Also, another thing, you can't really use like Steel Skin or Molten Shell because the casting damage taken just almost instantly drains all the shield. So Steel Skin or Molten Shell doesn't really add much. And Immortal Call would help, but then again it only lasts for like 1 second. So the second setup is actually using the Rat Cage. However, I discovered that that was not really a good, well, it's an interesting idea, but it was actually reducing the damage from Eye of Innocence way too much. In this case, I'm taking 24 fire damage from the Eye of Innocence, but if I use Rat Cage, 100% of fire damage from hits taken as physical. Since I had more than enough armor to mitigate 90% of the physical hit from the Eye of Innocence, I was essentially taking 10 physical damage from the Eye of Innocence, which slows down casting damage taken procs way too much. And this was also using Devouring Diadem and squeezing in Determination inside it, Herald of Ash, Defiance Banner and Vitality inside the helmet. So yeah, it was slowing down the procs of Flammability and Sniper's Mark with the casting damage taken. The thing with non-blood magic is you do consume a lot of mana, and once you get a lot of cast speed, you drain mana so quickly. That's why Eldritch Battery helps quite a bit, because that's another thing, I don't have that much energy shield, and I had to like pick up this one for elemental damage leech as energy shield, but also add Desecrate to one of the casting damage taken procs. Essentially to add Desecrate for the Devouring Diadem to consume those corpses, and when it does that, it recovers, I believe, like 400 life, mana and energy shield per corpse. And it does that every 5 seconds. It's not very consistent, and I was sometimes running out of energy shield, especially in maps with a reduced regeneration or recovery rate, which is not a problem for the blood magic. The damage was also lower a bit. That was without Righteous Fire, but with the Flame Wall. If you use Omeyocan boots, you don't want to use it with the non-blood magic setup, because you will have mana and you will reserve it. So you can replace Omeyocan boots with the Death's Door. It's not as good, but it also gives you more all resistances, a bit less movement speed, and you are immune to bleed and yeah, just bleed, not corrupting blood. So yeah, that's pretty much all for this. I'm gonna try to edit this video to make it shorter, but hopefully I didn't miss anything important. If you got any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'm gonna try to answer them. As for my next build, I started the Flame Blast Ignite build, which is not really gonna be anything too special. So for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.